All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome back. The air is fresh, a little rainy, but Daf Yomi's back in, regular schedules, although I think that we're starting
tomorrow.
New evening time, 8 o'clock, not 8:30. We're going to see how that goes. So if you are an in-person person, 8 o'clock. If you are a at-home viewer, same bat time, same bat channel, as they say. We are on Daf Pei Vav Amud Aleph at the Mishnah, but we first have to mention our two sponsors for the month. They're sponsored by Jeff and Chava Bela Wald, Lili Nishmas, Jeff's father, Mr. Roman Wald, Avram ben Shmuel, Zichron Levracha, and your grandfather, Mr. Menachem Eisner, Menachem Mendel ben Mordechai, Zichron Levracha, who's your tzitzis are in Rosh Chodesh Nisan. May their neshamos have an aliyah through our learning, and also Daf Yomi for the month is sponsored by Shmuel and Miriam Fuchs, Lili Nishmas Shmuel's mother, Bela Yenta Bas Chuna, Zichron Levracha, who's your tzitzis on Rosh Chodesh ER, upcoming, right, this week, and may her neshama have an aliyah, and we are at the Mishnah.
It's called the month of donkeys because it's ER.
Oh, I see. Very good, very good. Okay. Shlosha Zaysimhain. There are 3 times to harvest olives. Since we were talking about the various ingredients of the mincha offerings up to this point, we talked about how to get good flour last time. Now we're talking about the olive oil. Ubahen Shlosha Shmanim. Each 3 times you harvest, there's also 3 different qualities of oil within each harvest. Hazayas Harishon, the first time you harvest olives, Megar Gero Berosh Hazayas. You pick them from the top of the olive tree. And those are the ones that are ripened first. They receive the most sun. The Kotesh, so you gotta smash them up a little bit in a mortar and pestle. I was going to do a vestal and porter, but mortar and pestle. I could do it. You put them into a basket, and then the oil drips out of the olives, and that's how you get started. Rabbi Yehuda says, Sevivos hasal. You don't put it all into the basket. You put it against the walls of the basket, around the outside of the basket, and that is where how it drips down the sides of the basket, and you get better oil that way. Zer Rishon, that is the first. Chazar v'toin bakora. Then after you get that first drops of oil coming out of the olives at that point, you then put it into a press, and you put a beam on top of it. Rabbi Yehuda says, ba'avonim, beams are too heavy. You don't want to squish them that way. Rather, you put rocks on them, and that way it just presses them slightly, right? Zet sheni, that's the second olive, that's the second oil that comes out. Chazar v'tachan, then you go back and you grind up the olives, the sediment that's there, v'ta'an, and then you put it back into the press, and that is zet shlishi, that's the third oil that comes from the first harvest. Harishon, the first oil that comes out is liminora. That comes out, that oil is the first drop, that's shemen zayis zach, that's pure olive oil, that's the
one for the menorah.
That's the one for the menorah, that's correct. V'hasha'ar, the rest of the oil is kosher lemenachos. That's for all the korban mincha offerings, you need the oil. It doesn't have to be as high quality. Then you get the sheni, the second time we're going to harvest, megar gero, Rosh Hagag. You're going to get the roof height level olives, middle of the tree, it seems like, the kotesh, and then you're going to smash them up in the mortar and pestle, v'nosim l'toch, put them in the basket. Rabbi Yehuda says, sevivos hasal, around the outside of the basket, right? We don't want it to squish into the bottom of the basket, right? That I guess has, what is the issue with the bottom of the basket?
Drugs, like the sediments?
Yeah, you get the sediments, I guess, that settle into it, and then I guess maybe the top olives will squish the bottom olives, so they want unsquished. So you put them against the side. I think that's Rabbi Yehuda's point.
Baskets have holes.
And I think that's the point. That's what you want. So you're putting it in a basket that has holes, so it drips out, right? You want to get that. You put another container underneath the basket to catch the oil as it drips out. Zerishon, that's the first oil that comes out. Toin Bakori, put it on a beam. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Ba'avonim, Rabbi Yehuda against us with stones. Zesheni, that's the second one. Chazer v'tachan, you grind it up. V'ta'an, and you put it under weight. Zeshlishi, that's the third one. Rishon, the first one is lemenorah, that's also kosher for the menorah. And v'hashar, the rest is lemenachos, is for the menachos. Shlishi, the third group of the third harvest, is you take the rest, right? You've got the rest of the olives. Oat no, so you put those Beves Habad. So you take the rest of these olives and you're going to put these olives, these remaining olives into the olive press ad sheyilke. So you're going to wind up making them to they're gonna soften slightly, right? You let them sit there and they soften. Ma'alehu u'minagvo berosh hagag. Then you have to take them and you have to let them dry on the roof, right? Because you don't want that moisture that comes out as they're softening is not olive oil, really. That's something that's a moisture that you want to get out in order to soften the olives. But now that it's out, you want it out of the way before you get the oil. Kotesh, then you smash it up in the mortar and pestle. Put that in the basket. Rabbi Yehuda says sevivo sasal on the inside of the basket. Zeh rishon, that's the first. Then there's an extra process, right? In the third harvest, you gotta do an extra step in order to get the first oil out. V'toin bekora, then you go back and you put the beam on it. Rabbi Yehuda Omer ba'avon, Rabbi Yehuda says with stones. Zeh sheni, that's the second. Chazer v'tachon, you go back and you grind it up. V'ton, and you put weight on it. Zeh shlishi, that's the third one. Harishon in this set, the third one is, the menorah is also good for the menorah. V'ashar l'menachos, the rest is good for the mincha. Okay, Ibailu. So Gemara wants to know the question, right? The top, Megar Garotanan o Megal Garotanan. We have in our version of the Mishnah, it says Megar Garo. Megar Garo, which means to smash it here or there, right? But they're not fully ripened, right? You're just picking them from here and from here. Sorry, Megargo means you're picking them. Pick from here, and Megalgalo means that we are going to. You're going to leave them all in the tree until they're fully ripened, right? So therefore, that's the question: are we picking the ones we want, or are we pulling? We're waiting until or Megalgalo. We're going to wait until they all become ripe on the tree. So Toshma, come and listen. Detanya, learn our brisa. Shemen Zayis, the pasuk says, by the menorah you need Shemen Zayis Zach Mize So, right? It has to be able to come from the olive. Mikan Amru Zayis Rishon, the first time you take the olive, Megal Galo, so you leave them in the tree in order for them to ripen. Berosh Hazayis at the top of the tree. Then konso beis habad, then you're gathering them all into the olive press. V'tochno berichaim, and you grind them up in a mill. V'nosno besalim, and then you put it into baskets. Shemen hayotz minazeh yarishon, the oil that comes out first. That's the shemen zayisach that we're talking about. Ta'an bekora, then you put a weight on it with the beam. Shemen hayotz minazeh hayasheni, the oil that comes out at that point, that's the second oil. Chazar uparak tachan, then you take it out again, and you're going to grind it up, and v'ta'an, and now you're going to smash it again. Zahaya shlishi, that's the third time. Harishon lemenorah, the first comes for the menorah. V'ashar, the rest is for menachos. V'chein zayasheni, so too you do it with the second harvest of olives. V'zaya shlishi, you do it a third time, like our Mishnah says. Ot no bebeis habad. So, but the third time, right, we're not going to smash them immediately. Rather, you're going to put them in some kind of basket or container in the olive press, ad sheyilke, until they begin to soften themselves up a little bit. Umal l'rosh hagag, then you put them on the roof. Also come in tomorrow, and you put it out like you do to dry dates. You put them onto a flat, I guess. Lay them out on the roof so that they're all out there.
Like a sheet tray type of thing.
Yeah, I think that's what's going on, right? And then until the liquid drips off. V'konso, then you bring it into the beis habad, into the olive press, v'tochno berichaim, and you grind it up in the press. Nosno basal, you put it in the baskets. V'shem liyotzim minazeh hayarishon, the first oil comes out, that's the first oil. Tan bakora, then you put the weight on it, you put the beam on it. Shemen hayotzim minazeh hayasheni, that's the second. Parak, you take it out of the press. Chazer v'tachan, you go and you grind it up again. V'tan zeh hayashlishi, that's the third. Harishon lemenorah, v'ashar lebenachos. Okay, so that's very nice. The point is, though, the brisa uses the word megalgalo. That was our question. Megargaro or megalgalo? The brisa uses the word megalgalo. Rabbi Yehuda says, lo hayatochno berichaim. You don't grind it up in the press. Ella kocho b'machteshes. He says that you use the mortar and pestle. Right? That's a little bit less harsh on it. V'lo hayatoin bekora. You don't use a beam. Ela ba'avonim, you use stones. V'lo hayanosno besal, you don't put it in baskets. Ela tochsevivos, so you put it around the outsides of the basket, just like we had said. Okay, so now that is the question we want to know. Was it megalgalo or megargaro? And we said that this brisa seems to imply that it is megalgalo. So hagufa kasha. So we have a problem with this brisa. This brisa says, right, kotesh. Right, it says that we're going to smash it with a mortar and pestle. I mean, our mission is a contradiction, right? Our mission is you smash with a mortar and pestle. Money, whose opinion is that? Rabbi Yehudi, This is Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Then it says tochatzal. Then it says you put it in the basket. Asan Rabbanan. That's the Rabbanan's viewpoint. So Hai Tana. So the answer is this Tana that teaches our Mishnah. Savra lakavase bechada upaligale bechada holds like Rabbi Yehuda in one sense that it needs to be put on the sides, that it needs to be smashed with a mortar and pestle. But the Rabbanan in this is Paligali Bechada are going to disagree in that they don't agree with Rabbi Yehuda's point that you only have to put it around the sides of the basket. You can put it even into the bottom, the middle of the basket. So we've almost got three opinions, right? Be very gentle with the olives. That's what Rabbi Yehuda seems to say. And then the Chachamim seem to say that you can grind it up and put it into the middle. And then this middle opinion that says we smash with a mortar and pestle and put it on and then just put it inside.
You can still destroy the olive, though, aren't you?
Yeah, but we want to smash the olives, right? If you just take a regular solid olive that's not cooked or anything, and just put it into a basket, nothing will happen, right? You got to smash it a little bit in order to get the juice flowing. Next Mishnah. Okay, quality of oil. Harishon shibarishon in lamalamina. The first oil that comes out from the first harvest of olives, that's the best oil that can come out. Hasheni shibarishon, the second oil that comes out of the first harvest, varishon shibasheni, and the first oil that comes out of the second harvest, shavin. Those are of equal, right? Hashlishi barishon, the third level of oil that comes from the first harvest, vasheni shibasheni, and the second from the second, vaharishon bashlishi, and the first of the third. So then those are shavin. Those are all equivalent as well, except that we said the first of the third could be used for the menorah, right? But as far as quality of oil, those are the same. Hashlishi shibasheni, it's almost like we've got, if you can imagine this matrix, right? We've got the third set of oil from the second harvest, vasheni shibashlishi, and the second oil from the third, hashlishi shavin, those are even, and hashlishi shibashlishi, the third from the third set, ein lamataminu, that's the lowest of the oils. Okay, so basically, as you go one step below each level of oil, the earlier the harvest is equivalent, right? So it's like, right? You've got 1, 2, and 3, right? You've got harvest 1, 2, and 3. This one is A plus. This one, right? 2 is equivalent to this, right? This is equivalent. The third is equivalent to the second of the second, which is equal to the first of the third, right? And then, right, this is the third is equivalent to that, and basically that's basically how we go. We go across this way. Okay. Af kol menachos hayu badin. Now, all sheyitanu shemen zayzach. Really, it should that all menachos, it would seem to be that you could put shemen zayzach into the menachos. Masha eno la'achila. Because the menorah, ma menorah she'ein la'achila, because here's the kal v'chomer. The menorah is not even for consuming. You're not even going to eat the olive oil; it's for burning. To una shemen zayzach, the Torah says it needs the purest of the oil. Menachos she'ein la'achila, the menachos which are going to be eaten, eino din she'etunu shemen zayzach. For sure, it should need the higher quality. You're going to even consume that. Talmud lomar. Therefore, the pasuk says zach kasis la'maor. It needs to be pure oil for the menorah. Vein kasis la'menachos. It's not necessary for the menachos to be of that finer quality. That's specifically a rule by the menorah. Says the Gemara, Peivav Amud Beis. Shavin, so now we said that they are of equal quality. V'hamart Rishon l'menorah, v'shar l'menachos. How can you say that the first quality of the second is equal to the second quality of the first when this isn't kosher for the menorah and this is? Right? We said this is also fine for the menorah. So what's going on here? Summer of Nachman bar Yitzchak, my shavin, what do we mean when we say they are equivalent? Shavin lemenachos. You're right. The first ones are always kosher for the menorah. What we mean is that if a person says, right, he's got to make a choice. Goes to the store, he's buying for his mincha, and he's got oil that's the second quality olives but it's the first harvest, or he's got second harvest from the first olives. Which one should he buy? Which one's better? The answer is these are the same. For his mincha, these are the same. This is the same as this is this. If he's going and buying, there's no reason to purchase this at higher price than this. This is going to be the same quality. So therefore, that's all we're saying. As far as the menorah is concerned, you're right. These are always only acceptable for the menorah, right? So that's a separate thing. Okay, then we said, Af kol hamenachos hayu badin. right? We said that it makes logical sense to say that all of the menachos should require shemen zayis zach. Tanu Rabbanan, rabbis learned. Zach, the pasuk says zach ein zach elanoki. The word zach means clean, pure, right? Rabbi Yehuda says kasis. The pasuk says kasis, which means crushed. Ein kasis elakatush. Kasis means with a mortar and pestle. They're crushed in that way. Yochel yehe zach kasis. Pasul lemenachos. You might think, okay, the pasuk says zach kasis is for the menorah. It's pasul for the menachos, right? Maybe the menachos you can't use that. Talmud Lomar, the pasuk says v'isar and solas balul b'shemen kasis. Right, it says by the menachos, by the minchas kohanim, it says that you take an isar of flour, which is mixed together with shemen. Which is kasis again, which is the word kasis. So you're allowed to use it. Im kain matam lama or. So then why does it say that the shemen zayzach has to be lama or for the menorah? Ela mipnei hachisachon. The answer is because of the extra cost. Right, the extra mints since the menachos, right, the menachos were brought all the time, and there's a lot of them, so you need more oil there. So therefore, you're allowed to use the lesser oils for the mincha offerings. So my chisachon, what does that mean? Chisachon, the cost. Rabbi Elazar, haTorah chasam mamonon sheYisrael. The Torah is worried about the excess cost on the Jewish people, as we had discussed before. When Hashem gave water, He gave water to all the animals, not just for Klal Yisrael to drink themselves, right? And so we see that so bring that here later on. Maybe it is okay. So that if it's too expensive, it's going to cost more. So therefore, the zach kasis or it's kosher for menachos, but you don't have to do it for the menachos.
You don't spend more than you have to.
Right, you don't have to spend more than you have.
Is that why extra virgin olive oil is expensive even nowadays?
Yes, extra. Yes, because it's the first that comes out. I guess it winds up being the one that has less sediment. Right, regular olive oil can be, although it looks pretty clear now. Right, the processed oils are. My comment. Tzav now. Pasuk says. Tzav es bnei Yisrael v'khui lecha shemen zayis zach. You should command bnei Yisrael, and they're going to take shemen zayis zach for the hadlakas, for the halakas neros of the menorah. Amar of Shmuel bar Nachman, or Shmuel bar Nachman says, "Elecha to you, velo li." Tells me that the menorah is for you. It's not for me. Don't think Hashem shouldn't think like Hashem needs the light to be able to see. He doesn't need the light to see. Lo leora ani tzarich. I don't need the light. It's for you, right? For you. So shulchan b'tzafon, the shulchan goes in the north, and menorah b'doram, and the menorah goes on the south side. Amar Reb Zreika, Amar Rabbi Elazar. Reb Zreika says in the name of Rabbi Elazar, lo la'achila nitzarech. Hashem says, I've got a table filled with bread. That's not for me eating. Right? I'm not eating that. V'lo la'ora nitzarech. I also don't need, just like I'm not eating the bread, I also don't need the light. So don't think you're lighting it for me. Vayaz labayis chaloni shekufim atumim. So when Shlomo HaMelech made the Beis HaMikdash itself, so they made the windows were wide and then got narrowed. So shekufim bebifnim va'atumim bebachutz. They were wider on the outside and narrower on the inside. Right? They were slanted inward like that. So normally when you build a house, you do it the other way. Make a narrow entrance, and then the light can diffuse into the house, so you get more light in the house. But you need the narrower space. That way more air doesn't get in or cold, whatever, right? So you get narrow space, but then it's wider as you get inside. They specifically built it the other way, right? The light, because the light of the Beis HaMikdash is coming from inside outward. Right? So it goes out, right? The Hashem is saying, Lo la'ora ani tzarich. I don't need the light from the outside into the Beis HaMikdash. The Beis HaMikdash is spreading the Kedusha outward. So therefore, the windows were designed that way so that the light would go outward. Right? Michutz la parochas ha'idus ba'ohel moed. It says by the menorah, the menorah was put outside of the parochas ha'idus in the Oel Moed. Eidus hu lechol bo'olam. It is, what does it mean? It's the parochas ha'idus. It's testimony. Testimony to what? It's Eidus hu lechol bo'olam. It's testimony to everybody in the world. Shashchina shora be'Yisrael. That the Jewish people have the Shechina in them. Right? Now, V'im tomar, if you're going to say, Le'ora ani tzarich, that Hashem needs the light, V'alo kor b'im shana, shachli Yisrael b'midbar, lo echlu oro. The Jews spent 40 years in the desert. Hashem had a pillar of fire at night and a cloud during the day. He doesn't need to know the directions, right? He was showing Bnei Yisrael, he was lighting it up for them. Ella, Eidos l'chol ba'ei olam. The reason why is the light's supposed to come from the inside outward for everybody in the world to be able to see. Sheshchina shor b'Yisrael, that the Hashem Shechina is amongst the Jewish people. My Eidusa. So what is the testimony? What are people supposed to see that indicates that the Shechina is there? So Amar Rava says, Zer ze ner ma'aravi. The western candle in the menorah, they would put the same amount of oil in each of the 7 lights, and then the westernmost one, which was the one closest to the Kodesh HaKodashim, would stay lit when all the other ones went out. And then they would clean out all of the menorah cups, and then they would set them all up, and then they would put that one out and light that one, relight that one last. So the shenosnim b'shemen kemidas chavruseha, they would put the same amount of oil in the western light as all the other ones, but they would then use that one. It would stay lit the whole time. It was the ner tamid, right? That's called, it was always lit. It stayed lit as a miracle with the same amount of oil. It stayed lit longer than all the others, and they would use that to light the other candles. And then at the end, they would go back, clean that one out, and relight that one again.
Same with Hanukkah. You only had a small drop amount of oil.
That's right. The miracles of the oils indicates Hashem's presence, right? So therefore, that's the nace. It did not continuously happen every day in the second Beis Hamikdash era. It happened sometimes and not other times. Hanukkah happened specifically, right?
But you can't move it to the same.
Okay. So that miracle testified that Hashem's presence was amongst the Jewish people. Says the next Mishnah. Let's talk about the wine now. Okay, we've got to know where does the wine come from. So Kaduchim Vatulayin Alpha. Places called Kaduchayim and Atulayin were the Alpha. Those are the best. Right? And in the Mishnah, the actual Mishnah has different girsos for what those names of those places are. But those are the places that they would take it from, whichever the names of those places are. Right, the alpha quality, that's correct. That's the Greek alpha that indicates that they are the best. Shnia lehen, the second best was Beis Rima, Beis Lavan, Bahar, Beis Rima and Beis Lavan on the mountains, Ukvar Signa Babika, and the village called Signa, which was in the valley. Ko aratzos hayu ksheros, right? All of the lands are kosher for the wine. Ella mikan hayu mevin, but that is where they would bring it from, right? Because it was best. Ein mevin lomi beis hazvolim. You're not supposed to bring from fertilized fields, as we had said before, lomi beis hashachim or irrigated fields. V'lomi moshin izra beinehem, and nothing that has had crops growing in between them. Even though we said before that if you grow grain together with grapes, that is a prohibition of kilayim. That's going to ruin everything. That's for sure, also. Where you're talking about even in a circumstance where you distanced it slightly and kept them separate apart, so there wasn't a prohibition of kilayim, it still weakens the quality of the field, and therefore we don't want to bring wine from there. In heavy kosher, but if you do bring it, it is kosher. Ein mevian helistion. You can't bring helistion. Helistion comes from the word helios, which means sunny. Right, they would take the grapes and they would ripen them in the sun, and they would become extra sweet. That is extra sweet wine. We do not want that, right? V'im heavy kosher, but if you do bring it, it's kosher, right? That's just not the finest wine.
Sun means like a hot room, or what does it mean?
Sun, I guess in the sunlight. Yeah, it was in the sunlight. It's a question about in the process whether they harvested and then hung the grapes in the sun, or whether they planted the grapes and they just got more sunlight by the vines. It's a question. But however it was, that's not the best wine, so we're not supposed to bring that. Ein mevi and yoshem, we don't bring old wine, right? It's got to be new wine from this year. Divrei Rabbi, that's what Rabbi says. V'cham machshirim, the chachamim say you can bring older wine.
Older wine be better?
It would seem that older wine has a higher quality to it, but we're going to see why from Psukim, I guess, why it seems to indicate that it is fresher, brighter color that we're interested in, and therefore not the age of the wine.
Vintage, not the vintage.
Yeah. Ein mevi'in lo matuk. We're not supposed to bring sweet wine. Velo meushan, or smoky wine. Those are flavors that are not going to be better for the that are better for the taste of the wine.
Like my wine, very dry.
Velo mevushal, not cooked wine. Right? That's why mevushal. Often we're makbid on people are makbid not to have mevushal wines for kiddush or things like this if you can, but that's mevushal.
Vim
heavy puzzle, but if you did bring it, it's puzzle. Can't bring, that's not wine anymore, you can't bring that. Vein mevi'in min hadolios. Right, so then we're not supposed to bring from the vines that are hanging on trellises. You see, people are making grapes. You hang them on the. You're not supposed to bring wines that are hanging like that. That's not the best way for them to. Ella haraglios. Rather, you let the vines grow on the ground, and that gets the nutrients better. I was going to ask Rabbi Giselson about all this Mishnah to see if there's any insights that he had, but we'll see. Not now, Yehudi's busy. Umin hakramim ha'avudim, and also from the vineyards that have been dug up, right? Because they would dig around the roots in order to be able to open up the nutrients, so they would be able to get nice and
You can breathe a little more.
yes. Below konsinoso bechatzavim gedolim, you don't bring the wine in huge barrels. El bechavios ketanios, you use small batch containers. Ve'ena mamalias achavios ad piha. When you fill it up, you don't fill the barrels up to the top, right? Kadeshi yehe rechon nodef, so that the smell will be able to have room to breathe inside the container. Ein mevi min piha mipnei hakemachim. You don't when you're going to take the wine off, the froth rises to the top, so you don't take from the top. Lo mishuleha, you don't take from the bottom, mipnei ashmarim, because that's got where the sediment settles. El mevi mishlisha me'em tza'a. I would explain this as questionable. You're going to take it from the third in the middle, which sounds like you take the barrel, divide it into thirds, so you get the middle third, and you take it in the middle of that middle third. That's the simplest explanation. The middlest of the middle. So that way that's where you get the good wine that doesn't have the sediment, doesn't have the froth on it. Ketzad hu bodek. So now they've got the spigot, they hammer it right into the middle of the barrel. So how do you have the person who is the person from the base of Mikdash is watching, because as the wine goes down, eventually you get closer to the top, right?
That's how you press it.
No, this is already pressed. Now the wine's already in the barrel. So now we're trying to get it out. So how do you get it out? So what do? You hammer the spigot into the side of the barrel. The wine is coming out. Hagizbar, the treasurer Yoshev, he sits next to the barrel. V'akana biyado, he has a stick in his hand. Zorak hagir. So once he sees that it starts to get a little bit of the froth coming out, a little bit of the white comes into it, hikish bekana, he taps the barrel with the stick, and they turn off the spigot. Okay, he says, that's enough from this barrel. Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda says, sheyesh bo kimachin puzzle. If it's got spores, I guess it's got little things floating on it, right? Then that is puzzle. That invalidates the wine. Shenamar, as it says, Tamimim yulachem u'minchasam, it has to be pure, right? For you and for your menachos. Tamimim yulachem v'niskehem, for your mincha, and also tamimim, it has to be for your wine, right? So it can't have any blemishes in it. So, ein mevi'in lo matok v'lo mavusha v'lo ma'ushan, says the Gemara. You're not supposed to bring sweet, smoked, or cooked. So the Haktani Reisha, the beginning says in Nevian as helistion. It says already that you're not supposed to bring helistion, then heavy kosher. So then why is it that sweetened wine is puzzle? So which is it? Amar Ravina says kroch utnat. You put them together, right? So that we're saying that as far as helistion, it says that it's kosher, right? It says rather you're not supposed to bring helistion because we're not supposed to bring sweet. And if you do bring it, then it's puzzle. So therefore, that's how we read the Mishnah, right? The part where we said that if you did bring it, it's kosher. It's not talking about the helistion. The helistion is the sweet wine, which is puzzle. Amar Ravina says, just said that. Ravashi says, Chulia de Shimsha lo mois. He says, no, there's a difference. If it gets sweetened by the sun, that's not disgusting, right? So it's kosher b'diavad. Right? Chulia de pera mois. But if it's sweetened because you have extra sweet grapes, that's not good. That's already extra sweet grapes are no good for the base of Mikdash. We don't bring those. That's what's puzzle. So he says there's a difference. Okay, then we said Eimevin Yashin, you can't bring old. Rebbe, that's a different Rebbe. V'cham machshir, Rebbe Chacham say you can. So Amar Chizkiah says, my time of the Rebbe. Why does Rebbe say you can't bring old wine? Because Amar it's a pasuk. The pasuk says by Rosh Chodesh, it's Revius Hahin Kevet La Keves Yayin, right? For each keves you bring wine. Ma Keves Ben Shnaso, just like the sheep, it's a hekish. Just like the sheep has to be in its first year, Af Yayin Ben Shnaso, so too the wine has to be in its first year. Okay, so therefore, ma keves ben shtei shanim pasul. Now, if that's what you're going to say, if the sheep is 2 years old, it's pasul. You can't, right? It says a keves, right? Not an ayil. So it has to be a keves that's pasul. So af yayin ben shtei shanim pasul. So then wine that's 2 years old should also be pasul. Before you say, yes, that's true, the Tanya in our Brisa, the Brisa says not like that. Yayin ben shtei shanim lo yavi. It says lechatchila, you're not supposed to bring wine that's 2 years old. Vim hevi kosher, and if you did bring it's kosher. Now man shmaso, whose opinion would that be? Damar lo yavi, that'd be Rabbi. Rabbi is the opinion says you can't bring it. The Chacham says you could bring it. It's not even a problem to bring it. But according to Rabbi, who says you can't. V'kamarim hevi kosher. It says here if you did bring it, it's kosher. So why? Why shouldn't we say it's just like the sheep? So Ella Amar Rava, Rava says Hainu time of the Rabbi. This is the reason why Rabbi says it. The pasuk says not from that. It's not from that hekesh. It's tichsev. The pasuk says in Mishlei, Al teira yayin ki yis adam. Don't look at wine at the time of its redness, where it's most delicious to, right? If a person is looking to avoid sin, in the pasuk in Mishlei it's explaining, don't stare at tempting wine. And therefore we understand that it is understood, as Rashi says, that wine is its most red in its first year. So therefore that's when it's most tempting, and so therefore that is when we bring it to the Beis HaMikdash in its first year. Okay. Ein mevi'in lo minha dolios. Right, we're not supposed to bring the ones that are hanging. We're supposed to bring them from the ones on the ground. Tana, we learn kramim ha'avudim pa'amayim b'shana. We're supposed to use vineyards that they work the ground twice a year. They would go through and that would make it the best wine by taking care of the vineyard, going through the vineyard twice a year. Rav Yosef hava lekarno de pardesa. Rav Yosef had a vineyard in the corner of a certain area, and derafik beit fei rivka. And he would dig around the roots of the vines very well, right? Twice a year. The avad chamra de dori maya ad chad train. And he got wine out of it that was able to be diluted twice. It was extra strong, and so therefore it had extra power to it. And so therefore by making it, by taking care of the soil and the crop, he wound up getting much nicer wine. Then the Mishnah says, "Lo yikonsin osan bechatzav gedol." You don't put it in big barrels; you put it in small barrels. Tana, we learn chavios, kadios, ludios, benonios. We're putting the barrels that are pitchers, the ludio ones that are mid-sized, right? The ones from Lud. So those, I guess, they tell you like you have like the Tupperware party, right? They'll tell you this is the size, right? The Lud containers. Ein manichos on shtayim. You're not supposed to put them next to each other. Two together, right? Rather, because what will wind up happening if one goes bad, then the smell causes the next one to go bad. So you don't want to keep them separate. Ella achas achas. You would store them spread out so that they would not go bad. Next, Mishnah says, Ketzad bodek gizbar yosef ekonomi yodav v'zarik hagir hikesh bekoneh. So the gizbar, the treasurer, was watching. They would put the spigot in, and he's watching the wine come out, and he would tap it. So Tana, we learn zarak hagir shel shemorim. So when the froth would come out, which is on the sediment on the bottom of the wine, gizbar hikish bakana. The gizbar would start to hit the container in order to say, that's it, time to stop the spigot because we've got all the good wine out. Velema le Maymar. Why doesn't he just say stop? Why does he have to have this whole thing with the stick and tap the barrel and just say something? So Misayeh le Rabbi Yochanan. This supports Rabbi Yochanan. Says Dam Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says Kishem shadibur yafe lebesamim. Just like when they were grinding the ketores, it was good to talk during that process. The talking would help the grinding process bring out the flavors. Kach dibur ra yayin. Making noise while the wine is going on is bad for the wine. So don't make any noise, right? While you're taking the wine. So therefore they wouldn't speak at all while the wine was coming out. They would just tap with a stick. Rabbi Yossi bar, to big the signal. Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Yehuda Omer. Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda says, right? If it got any other kind of I guess we said spores or mold or whatever in it, then it would become puzzle. Boy, Rabbi Yochanan says hikdisho. So let's say you did sanctify. We said it's puzzle, right? This is our old question we've been having each time. Mao shielko alav mishum balmum. Do you get blashes for consecrating something which has a blemish? Kavan de puzzle, he says it's puzzle kibalmum dami. It's like it has a blemish, and therefore there's a punishment for that. O dilma ein balmum el behema teku. Or is it only that's the rule by an animal, and so therefore we don't have an answer to that question still? Tana Rabbanan, our rabbis learned. Elim, when they wanted to bring, since we're on the topic of bringing the best for korbanos, when they wanted to bring rams that were 2 years old, Moav, they would bring those from Moav. That would be the place that you would get good rams from. Kivasim, when you're bringing sheep, so Mechevron, those would come from Chevron. That was a place where they would graze the sheep that were fattest. Agolim, when you're bringing calves for korbanos, Misharon, they would get it from a place where Sharon was. And Gozalos, when you needed birds, Har HaMelech. They would have a place called Har HaMelech, and that would be where they would be able to get. That's where they would get them from. Rabbi Yehuda says, "Mevi'in kivasim shegavhan kirachvon." Rabbi Yehuda would say that for korbanos, you get a sheep that was as wide as it was tall, right? Get a nice square sheep. Amar Rava bar Rav Shila. Rava bar Shila says, "My time made to Rabbi Yehuda." Why is Rabbi Yehuda say that? Dichsev pasuk says about the days of the Geula in the future in Yeshaya. Yir'em miknecha bayomahu kar nirchav. Right, you are going to have a flock. You are going to have grazing in your fields on that day. A kar nirchav, which is fat sheep. Right, that they will. The days of the Geula will come when you have your sheep fattened all the way up to so that they are as wide as they are tall. Okay, so therefore you see wider sheep are more desired, right? That's what it says. That's because that's the bracha. So therefore those are the ones you're going to bring for korbanos. Ksiv, the pasuk says also about the future. La'asid lavo in Yeshaya it says Achom Osayach Yerushalayim. On the walls of Yerushalayim, if kadati shomrim kol yom v'kol halayla, I will have guards that stand guard all day and all night. Tamid lo yechashu hamazkirim es Hashem. They will never stop whispering. Those who remember Hashem, al domi lachem. Right? They will not, doze off. They will not stop. Right? They will not be quiet. So my Amri, what is it that they're saying? These guards, they got to talk the whole time. Right? There's a song for that. So Hachi Amar Rava bar Rav Shila. So Rav Shila explains. Ata takum terachim tziyum. More songs, right? He would say that they would say, "You will get up and you will have mercy on Tzion." And Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Rav Nachman says, "Bone Yerushalayim Hashem, Hashem, you are the one who the builder of Yerushalayim." These are psukim of Tehillim, so that's what they will be saying. Now, before the destruction, that's what they're going to say once it's rebuilt. Before the destruction, what did they say? Amar Rava bar Rav Shila, ki bachar Hashem b'Tzion iva l'moshav lo. Hashem chose Tzion, and He desired for those that dwell on it. So that is what was said before. Okay. Hadron Allah kol korban tzibur. Hadron Allah kol korban tzibur. Hadron Allah kol korban tzibur. We finish the.
Okay. Oh, and new Gemara.
That's right.
New volume.
New volume for me. Okay.
Chapter 10.
Brand new book or brand new volume for you?
Brand new volume. Here we go. Well, they're the same, right? Okay. Let's talk about measuring. Let's talk now that we've got the ingredients all set. We know how to do all of the korbanos. Now the measurements. Shtei midos shel yavesh. In the Beis HaMikdash, they had 2 containers for dry measures, right? Haviv b'mikdash. Isaron and a chatzi isaron. They had an isaron and a half isaron. That's all you needed because all the flour came in isaron and half isaron measurements. Rabbi Meir says isaron v'chetzi isaron. You had 3. You had the isaron, an isaron and a half, and another isaron. There were 2 different isaron containers. We're going to see what the difference is between his 2 isaron containers. Right, so he's got an isaron, a half isaron, and then he's got another isaron container. Isaron mehaya mishamish. Let's talk about what each one was used for. What was the isaron one used for? Shavaya modei lekol menachos. All the menachos came in measurements: 1 isaron, 2 isaronos, 3 isaronos. Loaya modei lo bishlosha lepar. Now the bull had 3 isaronos for the bull. That did not mean you needed a utensil that had 3 isaronos. You would take the 1 isaron container. Sorry? No, you wouldn't use the half one. They would use the full isaron one, right? They would use the full isaron one 3 times.
Right.
Okay? Because now the question is, what are we using the Yisarn one for? We'll see what they used the half Yisarn one for. But the full Yisarn one was for both. V'lo shel shnayim la'ayil. They didn't have a 2 Yisarn container for a ram. Ela moded in esronos. Right? They would measure 1 Yisarn, 2 Yisarnos, 3 Yisarnos. Chati Yisarn Mel Yimishon. What was the purpose of the half Yisarn measurement? Right? You're not supposed to use and double for the half, right? Sometimes you're looking in the recipes, right? And you've got 2 cups and you take the half cup out and you use it 4 times. No, not for that. Shabohaya Moded Chavite Kohen Gadol. The answer is because the Kohen Gadol would come with his offering, he had to take an Yisarn of flour. Then he had split it in half in the morning, half in the afternoon. Therefore, you needed a half Yisarn measure. Right? Mechza baboker, mechza ben arbayim. That was what that one was used for. So that's why you had a half Yisarn. Tanya, we learn in a brisa. Hi, Rabbi Meir says, Ma Talmud Lomar Yisarn lakeves ha'echad. Why does the pasuk say that Yisarn for 1 sheep? Melami shtei esronos hayba migdash. So Rabbi Meir explains, tells us there were 2 different Yisarn measurements in the Beis Hamikdash. Echad godush ve'echad machuk. One would hold an Yisarn that was heaped, and one was a larger one that would hold an Yisarn in it even when it was flattened out. Most of the containers, if you've got dry measures, you could pile it up over the top. So that was the way that wasn't like our cup. When we have a cup, you flatten over the top. They would have a measurement that was small so that if you stacked it and put all the flour scooped up to the top, that was a cup. Right? So an Yisarn measurement was an Yisarn that had the flour sticking up over the top of it. Right? Then they had another one that was larger so that it would smooth on top. So the Godush, the one that had a measurement so that it would have an Yisarn when it was overflowing, Shaboya Moed L'Kol Menachos. That one was the main one used for all the mincha offerings. Machok, the one that was flat, Shaboya Moded Lechavite Kohen Gadol, that one was used for the Kohen Gadol's offering. Right? So because you're going to divide it in half. So since you're going to divide it in half, the overflow would spill as you were then measuring it from that container into the smaller container. So therefore, they made sure that that one was a flat Yisarn. So otherwise, you're just measuring an Yisarn and then dumping it into the main container. That's no problem. You're not going to lose any. But since you have the overflow and then you're going to measure from that, it would spill. So therefore, for the Kohen Gadol, they had a flat one.
Actually has a picture of it.
Do they?
Oh, down here in the
Rashi. Well, no, that's something else. Rashi has a picture, but we'll get there. That's talking about the hin. The Chachamim Ram and the Chachamim say Lo hayasham ela Yisarn echad. There was only 1 Yisarn measurement. Shnemar v'Yisarn echad lakeves echad. The pasuk says 1 Yisarn for 1 sheep. That was only 1. Imkein matam lomar Yisarn. So then, how do you explain why several psukim later it says Yisarn double language? L'rabos chati Yisarn, in order to tell me that there's another utensil called the half Yisarn. Rabbi Meir says chati Yisarn minole. How does he know that you need a half Yisarn container? Nafgalei me ve'Yisarn. He says an extra vav. In ve'Yisarn echad, there's an extra half Yisarn. And v'Rabbanan vav lo darshi. The Rabbanan say that extra vav doesn't teach me anything, so therefore I need Yisarn to tell me there were 2 Yisarn measurements, an Yisarn and a half Yisarn. Rabbi Meir, hi ve'Yisarn echad lekevas echad, my avid lei. What does Rabbi Meir do with the fact that it says Yisarn echad? There's 1 Yisarn container when he has 2 Yisarn containers. Hahu shelo yimdo lo bishel shlosha lepar. He uses that in order to tell me there's only 1 container. Don't use a second, don't make other containers for 2 Yisronos or 3 Yisron containers. The Rabbanan say, Nafgalahu minikudo. There's a dot over the word Isaron in Isaron. I have a tikkun. I was going to bring a tikkun. I forgot. But if you look in the tikkun, there is in fact a dot, right? It's written like this, right?
A tikkun for the Chumash?
Yes. Right? Isa.
We have a Bakar tikkun, might that work?
Yes, do you have that? That would be amazing. Isaron.
Every time the word is written?
Just this one time.
Oh, okay. All right.
Perfect. That's exactly what we're looking for.
Huh.
Right? Isaron.
By Bruce
The midbar. Chafches. It is. Chafches Chafet.
Right. 29:15.
It's not there. 29:15, you say? There it is. Yep, exactly right there. If you take a look, right there.
Oh yeah, yeah.
There is a little dot over the Yisaron. Right? So therefore that little dot over the Yisaron is important. Right? So that's where you know one utensil, Detanya, as we're in a Brisa, Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi says, Lama nukud vav sheben Yisaron. Why is there a dot over the vav in the word Yisaron? Shel Yisaron, Rishon Shel Yom Tov, Harishon Shel Chag, right? Was of the word, the first word, it's of the first Yisaron, of the first day of Sukkot. Should the answer is Shelo Gimdod Lo Bishel Shloshel Apar Lo Bishel Shneim Lail. In order to tell me the measurement is always the same Isaron utensil, not a larger one for the bowl, not a larger one for a ram. For Rabbi Meir, Nikudu Lo Dorish. Rabbi Meir says there's nothing that has no drasha for it, which is interesting. So then what's it there for? I don't know. Rabbi Meir doesn't learn anything extra from that. Okay. Mishnah says Chati Isaron Ma'ayim Mishamish. What did they use a half Isaron for? Shabaya Moded Lechavite Kohen Gadol. They would measure that for the Kohen Gadol's offering. Moded, they measured it uramini, but here's the contradiction to that. Brisa says Chavite Kohen Gadol lo hayabayin chatzoyin el mevi Isaron shalim v'chotzehu. They didn't bring the Kohen Gadol's offering in halves. Rather, they brought a full Isaron and then they cut it in half. So Amar of Sheisha. So therefore, so. What do you mean? You have it basically take the whole thing and then they would just pour half of it out. So then you didn't need a measure. Some Rav Sheshes says, my modei nami diktani mechalik. No, the measurement was when you split it, right? They'd bring the whole thing and then they would use the half measurement in order to split it. Boy mine Rami Bar Chama Rav Chisda. Rami Bar Chama asked Rav Chisda the question. Chati Yisar Rabbi Meir Godush Hayo Machukaya. The half container, according to Rabbi Meir, was that one heaping? Right? Now you don't need the flat anymore. Was that one flat? So, v'tiboylach rabbanon. So why don't you ask the rabbanon? The rabbanon had one isaron. Was that one flat or was that one heaping according to the rabbanon? So the rabbanon isaron gufei lumi boilahu godush haya omachu kaya. So the Gemara says the chachamim. Right, we have to ask the question, right? Whether the one that they had was that one flat or whether that one was scooped. So Amar Lei, so he answers back, Midi Rabbi Meir, Nishma Rabbi Meir. So from what Rabbi Meir says, the logic behind Rabbi Meir, we can understand what Rabbi Meir holds about the half container. Midi Rabbi Meir, Nishma Rabbanan. And from what Rabbi Meir says, we can then understand what the Rabbanan say. How does it work? Midam Rabbi Meir, Isaron machuk, chatzi isaron nami machuk. Since the fact that Rabbi Meir says that by the chavitin it was a flat container, so also, right, then you also are going to have by the half one is also going to be a flat container because it makes sense that within this offering they were using a container that held everything on the inside. So therefore, why shouldn't it be consistent across that offering? Now, the Rabbi Meir machuk, from the fact that the Rabbi Meir says that it was a flat container, l'Rabbanan nami machuk. There was no argument between that and the Chachamim about what the half-size container was. The half-size container also was flat, and so therefore you can then know that since the half-size container of the Chachamim was flat, the full Isaron size one was flat as well. Rabbi Meir just added one extra container, which is the Isaron that was overflowing. But the Chachamim don't have the overflowing container. So that's what we say. Rami Bar Chama Rav Chisda. Rami Bar Chama asked Rav Chisda the question, Chavite Kohen Gadol b'memachalkin lechalos. How did they split up the Chavite Kohen Gadol into the loaves? Right? You had to divide it into 6 loaves. So how did they divide it up? Did they have biyad or bekli? Did they have a measuring utensil for that? Or did they just, eyeball it, separate it by hand? So pshita de biyad, it's obvious that they eyeballed it. They just did it by hand. De ibekli tortini yachnis. Because if that was the case, then what are they doing? They're bringing a scale into the Beis HaMikdash in order to measure it. V'yachnis. So what's the big deal? Bring a scale in. So kevan de bekloliksiv. You don't want to do that because there's the curse that's coming up in Vayikra Chafav, right? Those curses, it says that you will have so little wheat, you'll be measuring it out with a scale. So lav orach ara. We don't want to bring a scale, which is associated with curses, into the Beis HaMikdash. So boy mini Rami Bar Chama Mirav Chisda. Rami Bar Chama asked Rav Chisda, Shulchan mahu shekadesh kimatzim. The shulchan, right, which is a utensil. If I take a kemitza, which is if I take the frankincense, which usually is supposed to go into those spoons, and I put that onto the shulchan. What if I just take a kemitza, either from those spoons, instead of putting it into the spoons, I just put it right onto the table? Does that sanctify it? It has no inside. That's the issue with the table. So does this table sanctify on top of it? But godesh shalom, because it's heaping over the top. Since it sanctifies the bread, which is over the top of the shulchan, so too it can sanctify the frankincense which gets put on top of it as well. Or it only works on the bread because that's what's appropriate for putting on the shulchan. And that which is the other menachos, he says this is actually the question of whether it's talking about the frankincense or whether it's talking about a kmitza from another mincha, right? This is the Mefarshim, other Rishonim say that we actually took a kmitza from another korban mincha and put that onto the shulchan as our sanctifying utensil. Can that work? So what isn't appropriate for the shulchan, it doesn't work. So Amarlei Eino Mekadesh. The answer is the shulchan does not work for that. The shulchan is not going to, you can't put a kmitza onto the shulchan and be okay with that. Any, is that true? V'amar Rabbi Yochanan, did Rabbi Yochanan say, Divrei Omer Tfachayim Umechza Kofel? We're going to learn about the size of the lechem apanim, that it is a long sheet, which is 10 tfachim by 5 tfachim. And then you're going to take this side, and you are going to fold them up so that this is only 5 from there to there, right? So that's what we're going to fold up. So we're going to fold this up 2.5 and 2.5, right? You stacked 6. 6 times 2.5 is 15. It means that the shulchan was able to sanctify things 15 tfachim higher than the shulchan. So, L'divrei ha'omer tefachim kofel, according to the opinion that says no, this stack was only 2 tefachim tall. So then, because we're going to learn that this was actually, according to that opinion, the width was actually 6 tefachim, and so therefore this is only 2 and this is only 2. So if that is the case, so then nimtza shulchan mekadesh shnei masar tefach l'mala, it's going to be 12 tefachim high. So Marlei. Eino mekadesh likrov, of a mekadesh lipasel. The answer is you're right. The shulchan is able to sanctify as far as making this into a holy object, so that if you now took this kmitza and went outside of the Beis HaMikdash area, it would ruin it. It has enough sanctity on it, but it's not sanctified enough that now you could take it and just burn it on the mizbeach, right? It doesn't fully sanctify. It creates actually a stage where it's sanctified in a middle ground, which is not where you want it. So it sanctifies, but it doesn't sanctify at the same time. So the shulchan has some ability. Okay, stop here at the Mishnah. Pick up the hin measurement tomorrow.